Hello, it is May 2nd, 2022. Today we're discussing corporate governance, especially as it relates to Arcimoto, a MicroEV leader. This is As the World Burns, tying polls, prediction markets, and forecasting into current affairs and news. I'm your host, Randall Burns. Okay, this episode has roots in a Twitter exchange I had with the Arcimoto CEO, Mark Frohnmeyer. And Mark is deeply involved in the five-star voting movement. And it is basically five-star is to Arcimoto as SpaceX is to Tesla. It's Mark's avocation. Now, I suggested in a tweet that the same voting methods that he uses there could be applied to corporate governance, and Mark thought it was a great idea. And so I'm making this video in part to expand upon that. Okay, key aspects of the modern corporation originated in the Netherlands centuries ago, where they had the first stock exchange and the first global reserve currency, the Dutch guilder. Now, the essence of corporate governance in large part is that shareholders get one vote per share. They vote for a board of directors and they appoint a CEO. And that's a lot of what people know about corporate governance, okay? Now, this is changing in part because platforms like Robinhood are making it much easier for people to monitor and be involved in corporate elections. Elon Musk has leveraged his position as a business magnate and CEO into becoming a major cultural figure. Now, I would argue that a lot more can be done with the planning process, and it could be as big a revolution as what we saw in the Netherlands centuries ago. Hedge fund manager Ray Dalio has called his means of organization an idea meritocracy. One adjustment to this that needs to be made is identification of predictive ability as a figure of merit. Now, voting processes were a key part in a revolution of economic planning started by Stafford Beer, and a lot of this was incorporated without inclusion of the voting processes into logistic practices that are very widespread in major corporations today, and this spurred the creation of big data. Now, that started as kind of an alternative to centralized economic planning and bureaucratic organizations. This shows a studio in Chile that was being used for that purposes, and the participants would be voting using hardware in their armchairs, and this was done in the 70s before the microcomputer revolution. Beer drew in part from research at Rand Corporation and NASA, currently still taught at places like Carnegie Mellon's SEI on the Delphi method. This was used to schedule very complex projects. DoD at the time was having these enormous cost overruns, and they brought this in as a discipline for scheduling purposes in very complex projects. It's still around. It's never become mass market in all places, but it's used in some of the most demanding applications. I've included the Wikipedia article on this method. It can be adapted to a variety of voting methods, including Condorcet voting. And it's, like I say, it's been extensively researched. This is not anything terribly novel, but it is solid. Now, five-star voting that Mark advocates is a simplified version of Condorcet voting. A full-featured version of this is the Condorcet Internet Voting Service hosted at Cornell University. This voting system allows folks to vote in a ranked choice matter. It also enables people to vote on priorities, not just yes/no votes or multiple choice votes. And I think this could enable you to get a much finer grained view of corporate stakeholders and their view of priorities, for example. The essence of Condorcet voting is to identify the choice that in simulated two-way races is preferred to all other options. Okay, Metaculus is a modern descendant, I would say, of the Delphi method. It's an online forecasting system with about 20,000 participants. Metaculus allows very expressive voting on probabilities. Now, it's been established, since literally for centuries that the tip of a bell curve in a large anonymous election oftentimes reflects hard to find facts. This is being used for things like anticipating pandemic trends right now. Several public health departments have signed on to using Metaculus. It could also be used for purposes of corporate planning. No one has really done that yet, but it can be done. And I think there's strong indications that this would be fruitful in terms of improving planning process. Very few people can, and planning teams can beat Metaculus. It has the drawback in that it has to be done pretty much in a fairly public setting, or at least a wide spread setting involving fairly large numbers of people. But with a company like Arcimoto, the number of shareholders and stakeholders is large enough, I think, that you can at least apply it to certain corporate requirements. Now, one can argue that the rise of internet communications made Tesla possible because Tesla leveraged and organized a large number of retail investors. And the institutional investors really came into Tesla fairly late in the game. Now, Elon's own predictive skills have been notably lacking. They have not been spectacular. He does delve into areas that a lot of other corporate leaders simply do not touch, but he simply does not compare to the Metaculus planning record. Now, tapping into the shareholder base for purposes of doing a lot of forecast relevant to the market, could enable a constant stream of press releases. And that's something that can actually have a positive aspect on stock prices, as per this master's thesis done in Sweden a few years ago. Now, Arcimoto is facing some special challenges in this general area because there are not authoritative sources readily available on the MicroEV market. Arcimoto is pioneering a new market. For example, in this chart compiled by Argonne National Laboratory, nothing like the FUV was actually included in their statistics. They were just completely invisible. And this is going to be more the case as the Platform 2 emerges as an automobile alternative. But what Metaculus and Sieves open the possibility of doing is getting a very fine-grained view of the view that shareholders have of this emerging market, and getting a very nuanced view of it, and identifying those among the stakeholders who are best at anticipating trends and simply giving them access to management and incorporating their input into the planning process. They're a very valuable resource, and it's not commonly appreciated how rare this ability to anticipate trends accurately is and how valuable it is, especially in a market that is new and is potentially fast-paced as MicroEVs is. This is Randall Burns signing off. See you soon. Please do subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Comments are especially welcome, including those for future episodes.